stories for bedtime
and car time
and playtime.
And anytime you want to hear how much Jesus loves you in all this world.
Even little birds.
Hello, I'm Pastor Sarah at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. Welcome to this podcast where we tell stories told just for kids and kids at heart. Every week we tell a story about Jesus from the Bible, and for this podcast, you need to bring your imagination because we are going to imagine that there was a little bird in all of those Bible stories. A little bird who was friends with Jesus. A little bird who saw all the stuff that Jesus did and heard all the things that Jesus said. Happy day to you, podcast friends. I hope that you are doing great today. I also hope that you had lots of opportunities to tell and listen to stories this week. Stories are the best, and they're such a great way to learn. As I talked about last week, Jesus loved to tell stories. We call those stories parables. And those parables teach us about Jesus and his great big way of love in this world. They help us to see ourselves and this world in new ways. So here's another story for you from Jesus. So turn on those imaginations and get ready to listen to Season 2, Episode 7.
Little Bird and Jesus tell stories about yeast and mustard seeds.
For most of his ministry, Jesus and his friends would go throughout that region together. Jesus would teach and heal, and his friends would follow him, learning from him and helping him to care for his people. But at one point, Jesus sent out his friends in pairs of 2 to do their own teaching and healing. They went out on their own, carrying Jesus' message of love with them in many directions. Little Bird and a few others stayed with Jesus, doing what they always did, listening to Jesus teach and watching him heal, walking and talking together. But it was pretty exciting when all the friends came back. When they were all back together again as they were eating dinner, the friends of Jesus were telling stories about the amazing things they did when they were out together. These friends shared about how God gave them the power to heal and how they taught people about Jesus and how, because of them, those people wanted to follow Jesus too. And they wanted to love Jesus too, and love just like him. And as these friends of Jesus talked, Little Bird could tell that Jesus was so proud of them, and she was proud of them too. But as she listened, she started to feel some other feelings too. In part, she was envious. She wished she could be like them and do such impressive and amazing things. She admired them so much, but she also knew she'd never be able to do that stuff. She was just too small, simple, a tiny little sparrow. So Little Bird started to compare herself to them and to feel bad about herself. And as she listened, her wings began to droop and her head fell low. Little Bird hopped away from the table and flew up to some branches in a nearby tree where she could just pout a little all on her own. She wondered what she was even there for. What difference did she make? All of Jesus' friends were so amazing and literally doing miraculous things. And all she was doing was flying around and singing and eating seeds, just being a bird. And not even a big or strong or powerful bird like an eagle. She was just a sparrow. And so, feeling really sorry for herself, Little Bird hunched down on a tree and cried. But Jesus noticed that Little Bird had left the table, and he went over to that tree and looked up in the branches and hollered up to her, "Little bird, Are you there? Little Bird didn't respond. She just wanted to hide. But Jesus said, Little Bird, you can blend in pretty well with those branches, but I can see you up there. Are you okay? Little Bird squeaked out a tearful, I'm fine. But Jesus knew she was lying. Oh, little bird, he said, it looks like you are sad about something. Can we talk about it? Little Bird knew that she'd feel better if she did, so she flew down to Jesus. He held out his hand and she landed on it, and he gently rubbed her head, looking at her closely. That's when he noticed her tears. Little Bird, are you hurt? Little Bird shook her head, and for a little while she just let Jesus hold her as she cried. Sometimes even sparrows just have to let out their feelings. But eventually Jesus said, Do you want to talk about it? Little Bird nodded, and she was so grateful that Jesus could understand her. It would be hard to talk about feelings with bird charades. And so Little Bird told him how she didn't feel like she measured up to all those other friends, and that they were so amazing, and she was just a little sparrow. She talked about how she was envious, but she felt ashamed about those feelings because she admired her friends so much. She just wished she could do such amazing, impressive things. But she was just too little and unimpressive and not so amazing. Jesus listened, and then he said, Little bird, my little sparrow friend, just because you are different from them doesn't make you any less amazing or impressive. And just because you are small doesn't mean you can't or don't do amazing things or make a difference in the world. Do you remember that story I told a while ago? That one about the mustard seed? Little Bird nodded, but then she said, Tell me again, one more time. So Jesus said, Well, the kingdom of heaven, or God's great dream of life and love for this world, it's a little bit like a mustard seed. And Little Bird, you know how small a mustard seed is, don't you? Little Bird, still a little weepy, she nodded. Mustard seeds are so small, like a little tiny pebble of sand. They're even too small for birds like her to eat, too small to pick up in her little beak. Jesus continued, They are the smallest of seeds, but when those tiny seeds grow, they become the biggest of shrubs, as big as some trees. They're big and strong, so big and strong that birds like you build their nests in those mustard shrubs. The tiny seed grows and grows and grows and grows to become something so strong that all sorts of animals find a home in it. Jesus kept going. Just because something is small doesn't mean it's not strong. And just because something is little doesn't mean it can't make a big, huge difference for others. Oh, and Little Bird, do you remember that story about yeast? Little Bird shook her head. She didn't remember that story, but she did know what yeast was, in part because she loved to eat bread. Too much bread wasn't so good for her because it made her tummy kind of hurt. But sometimes those disciples would sneak her a bit of bread, and she just loved to eat breadcrumbs. And she knew that yeast was the thing that made bread fluffy so that it wasn't flat and crunchy like a cracker. Yeast made bread rise. Well, Jesus said, God's ways are a little bit like yeast. Say a woman was going to bake some bread, and she had a lot of flour, 3 measures of flour, or 145 cups of it, and she took just 1 spoonful of yeast, just a little bit of it, and put that into all of that flour, and mixed it with some water and a little oil and a little salt. And with that little bit of yeast, all of that dough was changed, transformed, made lighter and bubbly because of the yeast. And the woman took that dough and baked enough bread to make at least 50 loaves of bread, just because of a little tiny bit of yeast to make it possible. Little Bird smiled at the idea of all of that bread. And then Jesus said, "Little bird, you might be small, but because of you, this world is different. It's better. You might not be able to preach or heal or teach like my other friends, but you are you. And that's just what you need to be. You sing beautiful songs. You are always there for me whenever I need a friend. And you're always there for others when they need one too. I can count on you, little bird. You know how to listen to other people, which is just the best gift. And you show so much love. Love that is way bigger than that little body of yours. And that little love brings so much lightness and joy to all of us, just like the yeast in the bread." Little Bird smiled real big at this. She felt so much better, and she puffed up her little sparrow chest, so grateful for her unique gifts, for being a little sparrow with a big heart, just as God made her. Then Jesus said, "You know what, little bird? With faith the size of a mustard seed, with me, you can do amazing things. Like saying to that mountain, 'Mountain, get up and walk over there.'" The little bird laughed at that. She'd never seen a mountain walk, but she didn't doubt Jesus. And she was beginning not to doubt herself, too. Maybe being small wasn't so bad after all. Maybe being her wasn't so bad either. God made her just as she was, and God would use her just as she was to bring more love and more goodness into the world, just like Jesus' other friends. She would just do it in her own way, by being herself, just like the yeast and like the mustard seed. Well, friends, I love these stories about Jesus and how little things can do big things. They are some of my favorite stories that Jesus tells us. Maybe this week you can do something kind of fun. One idea is that this week you and a grown-up can make some bread. For many bread recipes, it starts by putting a little bit of yeast in warm water. And then you can watch that yeast start to get bigger and bigger and grow and use it to make some bread. Watch how that bread rises and grows. Or if you aren't bakers, just go get some bread and eat it and enjoy it. Just don't feed it to the birds because it really isn't good for their tummies. And if you want, you can go to the grocery store and go down the spice aisle and look at a jar of mustard seeds. And you can see how teeny tiny those seeds are. Have you ever felt like Little Bird? Sometimes I felt that way, like everyone else is so great and amazing, and I was just, well, me. And I remember being a kid and feeling so small and seemingly unimportant. But these stories remind us that God can do amazing things with little things and small people. And you don't have to be anything but yourself to share God's love and to make this world better. You, just as you are all you need to be. And you, just as you are, can bring so much joy and goodness into this world, just like the mustard seed and the yeast and Little Bird. And that's it for this episode of Little Bird and Jesus.
Now flap your little wings. Sing a little song.
And remember that to Jesus,
You will always belong.
Thanks for listening to Little Bird and Jesus, a podcast of St. Paul Lutheran Church in Davenport, Iowa. For more information on St. Paul, visit us at stpaulqc.org.